Hello there and welcome back to another video on my yoga YouTube channel. My name is Jessie. I'll be your yoga teacher for today and I'm going to take you through a series of poses. It's going to help for lower back pain. So a lot of the time lower back pain is connected to tightness in the hips as well as potentially tightness in the upper back, but we're mainly going to be focusing on the lower back and hip area for most of these poses today. So hopefully if you are experiencing back pain at the moment, then it's a bit relieved by the time that you finish this practice, but it can also be used to prevent pain in the future. So let's go. We're going to start in child's pose today. So widening your knees about as wide as your mat, toes come to touch, and then you'll sit back towards your heels as much as you can. So if you can't sit back all the way to your heels, that's fine. You just sit back as far as you're able to, and then you'll start to walk your hands forward, grounding down through the palms and maybe the forearms as well, depending on how much you're able to sink your chest down. So we're working on that hip flexibility and lower back is opening here as we sit back, but we're also reaching forward and getting some length and opening through the shoulders and chest as we lower down. Just taking some deep breaths here, getting really connected to that inhale and exhale. It's funny to think that we breathe all day long and all night, and we don't pay any attention to it at all most of the time. So with our yoga class, we take half an hour or an hour out of our day, and we really focus on breathing in a way that aligns with the way that we're moving our body. So just settling into the rhythm of that breath here. We'll move through side bends in this position as well. So moving over towards the left hand side first. Your left hand will move just to the floor outside of your mat. Your right hand will follow right on top of that hand, and then you'll drop the chest down again, sinking as low as it is possible for you to go. As you continue to sit your hips back, you're going to feel opening right from the hip all the way up to the armpit and potentially beyond on the right side of the body. A few breaths here. We usually want to take about 3 to 5 really good inhales and exhales in each position to really get the full benefits of it. And let's move over to the other side. So you can come up onto your fingertips and then just take a couple little steps until you make it over to the other side. The right palm can come down, left palm will follow, and we're sinking down through the chest. So inhale. Exhale, sinking a little bit lower, really feeling all the way down the left side from the armpit down to the hip and possibly further than that. Closing off the eyes if that's something that feels good for you here as we just take a few deep breaths. A couple more here before we move on. Okay, let's come back into our first position here, the child's pose. And then coming up into a low plank, so plank with the knees down. And we're just going to make some gentle circles with the hips here, rocking slightly forward, out to the side, back, and then out to the other side. So you're just making a big circle with your butt, basically. Rotating the hips around in their sockets. Your hips and your shoulders are ball joints, circular joints, and they can move in a very wide variety of angles. Going the other way now, once you've done about 4 or 5 circles in one direction, you'll switch. Just finishing up on the second side, and we're going to sit back into a narrow knee child's pose. So exactly what it sounds like. You'll bring the knees in together and start to sit back again towards the heels. So if your hips are a little bit more closed off and you found the wide child's pose challenging, then this might be a better option for you to modify your child's pose. You don't have to have so much hip flexibility, and this one is actually a bit better for the lower back, I would say. Marginally, they're both good. That's why we're practicing both of them. So getting nice and low, really sinking the chest down, sending the forehead to the floor to rest. Really feeling the shoulders opening. You can even move your head a little bit from side to side here. And then coming forward onto hands and knees for cat-cow. So you want your knees to be about hip width apart now. Hands right underneath of the shoulders. So you want a nice straight arm, straight line. Inhale, dropping the belly down, making a nice rounded arch through the back. It's a little chilly, so I'm wearing my big sweater. Makes it a little harder to see. Inhaling, letting the chest come forward, and then exhaling, you're going to round up. So spine heads towards the ceiling, pressing through the hands, gazes back towards your legs. And then inhaling again, taking the belly down, rounding, chest comes slightly forward, gazes forward, filling up until you can't breathe in anymore, and then exhale, sending the spine high, pressing the palms into the floor, really rounding through the shoulders, letting the head come down. One more time through each of those poses. We're really taking super deep, maximum capacity breaths as we move through these two movements. We got the whole spine warmed up with this little series of poses here. So we have one more in that series to do to get our spine moving in all the different ways that it can. And we're going to do that with a twist. So this twist is called Thread the Needle. First, you're going to take your left hand and just bring it up towards the side. So straight out from the shoulder, just extending and reaching, getting length through that arm, and then you're going to bring it underneath of your body, in between your other arm and leg. So over to the other side, bringing the shoulder down. Head maybe is going to come down. It depends if you can bring your shoulder all the way to the floor or not, and you might not be able to. Some days I can if my upper body is really tight. Today it's okay. But just do your best with it. And if you're able to rest the side of your head down, even if your shoulder is still a little bit off the ground, then feel free to do that as long as it doesn't feel like you're pinching anything, because you don't want to be causing any pain for yourself. So just letting that shoulder blade open up in the back, away from your spine. And your right arm here should be nice and elongated, reaching out. So you're crossing your arms in a T shape. Another thing you want to watch for is that your hips aren't twisting with your spine. So your hips should be nice and straight and square. What's going to happen is the left hip is going to want to follow the rest of the left side of the body as it twists. But see if you can lift your left hip up just a little bit. It might mean that your shoulder lifts off a little bit, and that's okay, but it's going to deepen your stretch. It's going to make it a better twist for you. Pushing the hand into the mat, your right hand, as you bring your left hand back through, out of the needle, and reach it up towards the ceiling before you put it back down again. Other side, reaching out from the shoulder, so just getting some length going through the arm, and then you're threading it through. So bring the shoulder down as far as you can, and right away we'll check in with that right hip and just set it straight, reaching the left hand out in front, getting that T-shaped cross of the arms, resting the head down if you can. So deep breaths here, deep belly breaths. You want to be able to feel your belly against your legs, against your knees. So with every inhale breath, just filling up the body, feeling the navel rise away from the spine. And then as you exhale, feeling the opposite as the navel pulls in. One more deep breath, and then on the exhale, we'll come up using that left hand, bringing our right arm up. Big reach towards the sky, the ceiling. And then bringing the hand back down. So our next pose will come to the belly. Bring yourself down nice and gently. Use the strength of your triceps. And then elbows will come forward so that they come right underneath of your shoulders. So this is called Sphinx Pose. So Sphinx Pose, you can take your feet pretty wide apart. So especially if we're working with a tight lower back, it's good to give lots of space between the legs. So the lower back likes it more when your legs are spread apart. So poses like wide-legged forward fold and cobbler, poses that we're going to do later on. Poses like that are really great for the lower back. So widening out the legs a little bit in any kind of back bend here. So Cobra 2, you can also do with your legs a little further apart. We're going to come down again, and we are going to come into Cobra a couple times. So we inhale, lifting, exhale, coming down, making this a flow just like our cat-cow. Inhale to come up as far as feels comfortable for you and your back. Exhale down. Inhale one more time, keeping the elbows in, shoulders back and down, away from the ears. Nice abdominal stretch there, and then exhale all the way down. You can release your hands alongside your body. So sometimes when we experience pain in a certain area, it can be related to insufficient muscle or insufficient strength in that area. So it's a good idea if you have lower back pain that permits you to do some activities that strengthen the lower back. That's actually a really good thing. So movements like back extensions, for example, or deadlifts, as long as you're very particular with your form, can be really good. What we're going to do is a locust, which is a lower back hold. So we're going to be squeezing into the muscles of sort of the upper butt, lower back, maybe mid back, and we're going to be lifting up the chest away from the floor. So you're going to want to face your head forward, not like I just did, facing the side. Arms can be alongside to start off with, or if you want to and you know you can lift up a little higher, then feel free to interlace your hands just behind your tailbone. So take an exhale, and then as we inhale, we're lifting the chest. So there's versions of this pose where you also lift the feet, but we're just going to be focusing on lifting the chest. So taking some deep breaths as we're here. You don't want to be ever holding your breath, although it is tempting in certain positions to do that. So holding just for one more breath, one more inhale, exhale, thinking of all that great strength that you're building, and then release. Whew. Wow. It's like the abs of your back. So let's get into a downward facing dog next. So first we'll kind of push the hips back a little bit just to release from that position that we were just in, and then coming back into tabletop. We'll get into our downward facing dog from here, spreading through the fingers, planting through the palms, getting nice and firm in your foundation with your hands are really important during your downward facing dog. And you're going to start to lift the knees as you tuck under the toes. Once you do that, you're going to feel your abs start to turn on a little bit, which is definitely a good thing. You might want to step your feet a little bit further back. You probably will, as you might still be pretty tight through the lower body, and then we'll start to lift the hips up and back, really straightening through the arms, straightening through the spine. Hips are really, really high. Biceps should be right alongside the ears in your downward facing dog. I think I say that in every video, but it's what you're looking for. And you can bend your knees here if that feels good for you as well. So that might also help you to straighten out your spine even more, to have a little bit of a bend in the knees. So from here, we're going to walk forward, just taking little steps in towards the hands. You might come onto fingertips eventually here as you get into a nice forward fold. So you can grab for opposite elbows here, just like that, creating a little box with your arms. And that's going to act as a little counterweight to bring you down further into your forward fold, gently using gravity. So my legs are bent here just like they were in my downward facing dog, which is fine. If it feels better for you to have your knees bent in your forward fold, then please use that. It also helps to protect the lower back. I've known people who have injured their lower back by trying to go in with straight legs and just force things. Straight legs are fine if you're more flexible through your hips and hamstrings, but you don't ever want to be forcing something
your body isn't ready for. Bend those knees. And we'll release the arms, bringing them back behind your back, interlacing the fingers, and then sending the knuckles up high as your chest comes down onto the legs, letting the head and neck release and rest. You can even shake your head no, nod your head yes. You know it's not holding any tension as you lift your hands up and forward towards your head. Really opening out through that underneath the armpit area. And then let's release those arms, bringing them down so hands come to the floor. Halfway lift so that your body becomes like a right angle. Your crown of your head is forward. Legs are almost straight, little bit of a bend in the knees still. And then exhale. So if you have blocks, this is a great place to grab your blocks. We're going to come into a halfway lift position again. If you don't have blocks and you absolutely cannot reach the floor and do this, so we're just going to be pedaling out the feet. You can also have 2 water bottles that are a similar size here, or anything that would hold a little bit of weight. So you're not putting all of your weight into these props, whatever you have. You're just putting in as much as you need to help you balance. It's really just adding that height for you. Blocks are usually not very expensive at all. You can find them for $5 each. But like I said, other things can work as well. Use whatever you have to give yourself a little bit of a lift. Good. Okay, so we will use these a couple more times, so we'll just keep them nearby, but we don't need them right now. Back into our forward fold. We're gonna round up through the spine, 1 vertebra at a time. So we're gonna go really slow. Legs start to straighten out, hips start to tuck under, and then we start to really get into the spine. And when you really close your eyes and really focus, you can almost feel each and every individual vertebra clicking into place. Head and neck come up last, and then I always like to shrug the shoulders back as well. Inhaling the arms up overhead, so aiming to have those biceps right beside the ears, and we're going to sit back and down, finding chair pose. So you sit as far back and down as you can. Weight is in the heels. So you're not on your toes with your heels lifted there. You want to have your weight back. Inhales and exhales. So again, we're strengthening here. Inhaling to lift all the way up to standing. Exhale, hands come through heart center. Really good. Inhaling up again. And then back into forward fold. Inhale to halfway lift. Grab those blocks again if you've got them. As you come down and fold, again, you're going to step back with your right foot. So your left foot, you might want to scooch ahead a little bit. Hands are going to come on your blocks on either side of the foot. So this is really a hip stretch. There's no getting around that. You're stretching out your hips. So on the right hand side right now, it's the hip flexor that's getting a stretch, while on your left hand side, it's more of the side and back hip, inner hip that's getting a stretch. So the flexor is the front part of your hip. You should be really feeling that on the right hand side. And maybe feeling a bit less on the left hand side. If that's the case, then you might be able to slide your foot forward a little bit more. Or you might just not need blocks and you might be just fine coming down onto the hands. So blocks are optional in this one. We're just going to be staying in our low lunge today, rocking a little from side to side maybe. Just keeping it simple. So So note too, if you found that having the blocks up really high was too much, you might just bring them down to the side. So the yoga blocks are actually kind of ingenious. They have 3 different length sides, so they can be used at 3 different heights. So you could even have them really low if you just wanted just a little bit of a lift. Okay, so keeping those nearby, as we do have a second side to do, we're just going to step the foot forward. Right foot's coming forward, back into our forward fold. Noticing how different those 2 legs, 2 hips feel. Inhale, halfway lift, maybe bring the hands up onto the blocks again. Exhale, hands plant. This time the left foot is headed to the back of the mat. Right foot maybe is going to scooch forward a little bit depending on what you need. Finding your hands on the blocks. Inhaling, really taking a nice deep belly breath. So again, you might feel your stomach expanding along the inside of your right thigh. Knowing that that feeling is a good thing because it means that your breath is going to be triggering your nervous system to relax and release your stress level. I don't know if that made sense. Sometimes the words just come out. So here we are. Little lunge, you might want to come down. Still got a few more breaths here, but sometimes as you stay in a pose, you can get a little bit lower with time. The last couple breaths here, maybe moving the hips around a little bit if you're feeling a bit stagnant. So inhaling as you come to lift the knee. Rather than stepping forward, we're going to come into triangle pose. So to do that, you're going to turn your left foot, towards the side of the room. And you'll start to lift up through the upper body. You want the side of your body to be parallel with the floor, or at least as close to that as you can comfortably achieve. So you'll notice I have my hand on a block here, but you could easily just be balancing with no block, just leaning the hand against, or leaning the forearm against the inside of the shin. So the hand on the left side is lifting up from the ceiling and helping us to open and rotate our chest open. So triangle is a really interesting pose. We're definitely getting a lot of length through the side, and it's also a very subtle twist while also opening a bit through the hips and inner groins. So there's lots going on. So if you feel like you're not doing it right, just try to adjust a little bit here and there. See if you can tuck your hips under a little bit more so your hips aren't sticking out to the side. See if you can come down a little bit lower, maybe extend your head a little bit more out towards the side wall. And then of course, lifting through that upper hand and rotating through the chest. Releasing, coming back down towards the floor here. We're just going to exchange sides by stepping that left foot forward, right foot back. So you want to step back a good ways, 4 feet or so. Toes on the right foot pointed out towards the side. So you might use a block here as I demonstrated on the other side, or you might not. So hand might be on the block, or it might be just forearm resting on the inside of the shin. Rotating open, reaching that right hand up to the sky. So you try to keep the side of your body here nice and long and straight, pointing the crown of the head out to that way and tucking the hips under a little bit. Lots going on in this one, like I said, but it is totally accessible for most beginners. Let's release that one. Back down into a forward fold. Blocks again, they can go away for a moment here. Just inhaling to halfway lift and exhaling to come down. We're going to take a big step out to the side, so pivoting. So you're on the long edge of your mat here. Feet come out wide. Hands can come to the ground if they can reach, or you might keep them on your hips if they can't quite make it to the floor. So our wide-legged forward fold, I sort of foreshadowed that this one was coming. And here we are. So feel free to keep your knees a little bit bent here. It also feels really nice to just bend one knee at a time and move from side to side. But mainly we are here for the forward fold action, coming from hinging from the hips, bringing the chest down, so leading with the chest, bringing everything in the upper body down, folding in towards the legs and down towards the floor. And inhale, take a halfway lift again, reaching the crown of the head forward. And exhale, come down again. And those little bends through the knees are always available to you to take whenever you feel like you could use a little moment of release. Okay, coming back up onto hands, you're gonna bring your heels in a little bit so your toes are pointed out, so you can get your hands to your hips and start to stand up. We'll start to bring the heels and toes in what we call a heel toe motion. If you do have a block, or even if you have a pillow, that will be very helpful for this next pose. Actually, I think I'll turn to the side to do this one. So this is our Yogi Squat. So you take your feet about as wide apart as your mat, and then you're going to start to sit your hips down and back. And hopefully you've placed your block in such a way as you can find it with your hips. So if you have very open hips and you have no problem sitting down into a yogi squat, then you really don't need to have that block there at all. Or you might have it down on the extremely low setting. That's actually not too bad. So elbows come to the insides of the knees. We're widening through the hips by pressing back through the knees. It's actually quite nice having a block there. Give it a try, even if you're a more advanced yogi, you might find that you like it. I don't usually use a block, but I don't mind this. Actually, it allows you to stretch the hips in a different way. So even if you have your block up on the very highest setting and you still feel like you're sitting up quite high, you're still going to be opening out through your hips in some way. So just take those deep breaths and hold the position. Trust. Good. So you can sit up just enough that you can take your block out from under your seat now. And just set that aside. So we'll use that one more time yet in our practice. You might actually want to bring your blocks down where you can reach them. Okay, so we're going to practice some seated folds before we get right down. So right leg is going to come in towards the left thigh. Inhale to sit up nice and tall, and exhale, folding forward. And you might bend into the knee a little bit here to let yourself come a little bit deeper with a little bit more safety. So remember the forward folds, how we were bending the knees to protect the lower back. The same thing applies for a seated forward fold. Bending in the knee just allows you to keep your spine a little bit straighter, and there's less of a curve potentially happening there. Inhale, come up, switch legs. So again, tiny bend through the knee if that's something that feels good for you in this pose. If you're quite flexible through your legs, that might not be something that serves you at all, so just let it go in that case. Don't use that. So trying to hinge from the hips, keeping the back nice and straight, the spine nice and long, crown of the head reaches out towards the side wall. Few breaths here. You could pulse the legs straight as well if that's something that feels good for you as you're breathing. You exhale, send the back of the knee down closer to the mat. And then bringing both soles of the feet in together, for Cobbler Pose. So sometimes called butterfly pose. Bring your knees out as far to the side as you can. You can help yourself out with that a little bit by opening the soles of the feet up towards the ceiling, almost like you're opening a book. As you do that, then you can start to come down, folding, like I said, from the hips, keeping the spine nice and long. So that's the general rule with forward folds, that you have a long spine. Now, I've also said that you should try to lead with your chest rather than your head most of the time in folds. So this is the one exception where it's actually okay and safe to just bow the head down. So you can do that now if that's something that feels good for you. It's going to get an extra stretch for your lower back for sure. As you come a little bit lower, might eventually be able to actually touch the crown of your head to your feet. Totally doable, totally possible. Just letting yourself breathe here. Hips are opening in all directions. Such a good pose for the hips. And then start to gently release, rounding the spine up, just like we did when we came to standing, trying to stack your spine bit by bit, right up to the very last bit. Time for a variation on pigeon pose. So pigeon pose definitely came up when I was researching poses to use in this sequence, but I decided to use a reclined or seated version. So the reclined version would just be doing pretty much the exact same thing but on your back. I'm going to show you the seated version. So for the seated, what did I just say? Recline pigeon. There we go. You're going to lean back a little bit and just brace yourself on one of your hands here so that you can use your other one to help get your left ankle right on top of your right knee. So if you've done this before, this will be very familiar. So now both hands can support you as you stay in this seated up position with your chest nice and lifted, so you're not collapsing and rounding through your back. That's the rounding through your back voice. Sitting up nice and tall through the chest. And if you want to, you can either move the foot in incrementally, or you can sit up a little taller incrementally, and that is going to make the stretch more intense for you. Try to make sure you're keeping your left knee out towards the side as much as possible as well. If it's coming in towards your chest, you're not going to really be feeling too much of anything through your hip. And it should be your left side hip that you're feeling the stretch on. So a little bit of wiggle side to side through the hips can feel really nice here. And then let's release it. Okay, so other side. You want to start with your feet a little further away again if you had moved it in. So you're going to bring now that right ankle onto the left knee. Probably could have just used one hand for that. And keeping the right knee tracking out towards the side. So you keep your chest nice and lifted. Rocking the hips side to side a little bit if that feels good for you. Or just staying still. Spending a couple seconds, usually want to spend 15 to 30 seconds at the least in a pose unless you're doing a vinyasa flow. At 30 seconds or more is when all of the real juicy physical benefits start to kick in, especially if you're really aligning your breath with what you're doing. Okay, let's release that side. It's finally time to come down onto the back. So there hasn't been a whole lot of reclined poses in this particular practice. Bringing the knees in towards the chest here and just rocking a little bit from side to side. Massaging the lower back and the hips out on the floor using your body weight. Have some little pops or clicks of little pieces of your spine moving back into place. And just finding some stillness in the center here. Release your right leg and let it go out long on the floor, holding your left knee in still. You're going to release your left hand, so your left arm is out from your shoulder on the floor. So that shoulder is going to stay down on the floor as we move into a supine twist. So your right hand is going to guide your left knee as it starts to move across. What you might want to do before you start to move across is just to shift your right hip over by about an inch towards the left. And then as you start to bring your leg across, you'll settle into your twist, just making sure that your shoulder on the left is not lifting up. So your head can either remain neutral, looking up towards the ceiling, or you can turn your head and look out over your left arm. Breathing, making sure inhales and exhales are still flowing and they're not impeded, even though we're in this twisted position. And then rolling back again. And then you'll want to switch your hips back to the center and then over a little bit towards the other side, just getting set up so your left leg can go out long, right leg is going to pull in towards the chest. We'll just hold that there for a couple seconds. And then releasing the right arm out to the side, you'll take your left hand and use that to guide your right knee across the body and over towards the left. Big deep breaths, trying to fill up even into the belly. So we're twisted, it's a little harder to breathe as deeply as we would be otherwise, but still doing your best, making the most of it. And you can turn your head to face the right if that's something that feels good for you. Releasing back onto your back. Again, we're going to bring the soles of the feet to the floor to just shift the hips back into the center. So our last two poses now, so we're almost done. We're using those blocks again, or block. You really just only need one for this, to do a bridge pose. So our bridge pose starts off by just grounding down through the heels and lifting up the hips. Then you'll tuck your shoulder blades underneath of your chest, sort of just wiggling from side to side through your shoulders until you get a little more height and you have those shoulder blades really tucked underneath of your body. At this point, you might be able to take your block, get it in underneath of your hips. Now, depending on how high you're lifting up, you might be able to have it on the very highest setting. So my lower back especially is pretty flexible, so that works for me. It might be uncomfortable for you on that height, so again, you can take it down to that height, or if you're really struggling in your back bend, I shouldn't laugh. But what I wanted to say is you can also stack if you do have two blocks like that, which should give you a really nice wide base as well for you to set your hips down on. Like so. Oh. So this is a really restorative version of a bridge pose. Usually there's a lot of glute firing and quad hamstring strengthening, but when we have the introduction of the blocks, it really takes all the work out of it, and we can just let things relax, surrender, get a really good stretch. It might look more impressive to do a really high, deep back bend, but it's not really the best for the body. It's not really the best thing for that sore area. Maybe not. So only you know the answer to that. I'm not making a judgment for you. Last couple breaths here, just really letting yourself sink down into that block. Or if you are just unsupported in your bridge pose because you didn't have anything for a support, you can, if you're flexible enough, quite flexible in the back, you can maybe get your hands and forearms under for a support. That can also work really well. And then again, I do recommend investing in blocks if you do want to have an at-home yoga practice that really caters to your needs. Because sometimes we all just need a block. Coming back down again, so just move your blocks and your props out of the way. Bringing the hips down, and we're going to open out for a happy baby. Knees come towards the armpits, grabbing from the outside edges of your feet with your hands, and then let's take a little rock from side to side here, rocking and rolling, massaging out that lower back. So keeping the spine nice and long here. Your tailbone should not be tucking under and rounding. You should be trying to keep it flat. I always have spinal pops and things like that happening in this one. Something about that nice opening, and usually I'm doing it right at the end of a practice too. Everything is realigned again. It feels so good. So release the feet, bring the soles of the feet back down to earth, rest the arms down alongside your body, and then start to extend the legs out long. So you might need to scooch a little bit on your mat depending how far down you ended up. And then just letting your feet rest out to the side, or alternatively they might flop in towards the middle. You can rest your hands on your belly, or you can keep them down, palms face up on the floor. Just doing a scan through your body and seeing if there's anywhere that you're still feeling tension or holding any muscular effort, and just try to let that go so that you're sinking down into your mat, almost like you feel like you're melting because you've relaxed so much. Notice if you're holding any tension around your jaw or around your eyes, outer corners, around the cheeks, or the area just between your eyebrows. Just notice if you can relax or soften a little bit more. Just taking another few deep breaths here. Just noticing if anything is jumping into your mind. Allowing those things to come, but then also allowing them to go with grace. Turn off the tap of thoughts as much as that would be nice, but we certainly can calm our nervous system down and slow our thoughts to the point where they're a little more manageable. So you might notice your mind is a lot more serene right now than it was when we started, but that doesn't mean that there won't be thoughts cropping up. So let them come. Like a cloud passing over the sky. There's nothing you can do about it. Just let the cloud pass. You don't need to focus on it. Let your thoughts be like those clouds that just go by for now, until you're ready to rejoin the rest of the world. So I'll leave you guys for today here in our Shavasana, our corpse pose. It's usually recommended that you spend about 10% of the time that you spent practicing in your corpse pose. So aim for about 4 to 5 minutes here if you have the time. If you don't, I salute you and I honor you anyways. And I thank you all for joining me for another yoga video. These are so much fun for me to make at home.
And I really appreciate when you share, like, comment, and subscribe. It really makes my day, and I appreciate all the support. Until next time, bye.